Hello, let's talk about how to set up client-side routing with UIX. And today we're going to use Reitit library, which is ClojureScript router for both front-end and back-end, and we'll use it for front-end use case here. So I already have a quick setup. Of course, first of all, you need to add Reitit into your deps Eden file. Then require Reitit front-end namespace, front-end easy namespace for easier setup, and Reitit spec namespace to set up routes validation. Then we have to specify a vector of routes. So we're going to have 3 routes here. The third route is going to have a dynamic part, which is going to be ID of an item. And then finally, when we load the application and start it for the first time, we would start the router and render UIX app. So when starting the router, we first create a router using router function, which takes routes, a vector of routes, and then a spec for coercion. The start function takes the route, the callback that will be called every time a route updates in the browser. And then using an option use fragment false, we can specify whether we want to use history API or use the hash fragment navigation. So most of the time we use history API because it looks like a normal URL without the hash. Right. And then in order to render whatever route we are on, we need to, of course, store the current route somewhere. So I added a global atom here using def once to make sure that it's not cleared on hot reloading. And then using useAtom hook, we can consume the atom and read the name of the route in the component, and then just render the keyword which represents the name of the route. And of course we can do something like switch on the route, and if it's home, then render home view, and if it's about, we will say about, and so on, right? And if it's item, then we can render item. So yeah, let's make it like this. Right. So we can see that currently we are on the root of the URL. And if we click go to about, we'll switch to about, and the text changed here from about view from home view to about view, right? If we go back and forth, you'll see how the URL and contents change. And that's basically, that's the easiest setup. You need to start the router, specify where and how to store the current route, and then somehow consume it inside of the UI component. And based on the current route, you can render different views and also read IDs of dynamic routes and do whatever you need. And of course, you can read the current route in nested components, so not only in the root component, like depending on how your application is structured. But there is one thing I wanted to talk about is, let's say that we want to add a new route. Like I'm currently in development, I'm developing my application, and I need to add a new route. For example, let's call it hello. Right. I will hit save. The app will hot reload, everything is fine. And then, for example, I want to update this link to hello instead of about. And now if I save and it will hot reload, you can see that Reitit will tell me that hello route is missing. And in fact, when I click on it, nothing is going to happen. Why is that happening? Right. So we have routes specified here, but we are only starting the router once when the application initializes. When the runtime calls init function, this function is called only once. So this means that during development, when routes vector is updated, we need to recreate the instance of the router. So it needs to we need to upload basically new routes configuration to the router. So with this setup, it's not going to work. So how we can fix that? Let's take a look. So we definitely need to recreate an instance of the router and then start it again, which means that we probably need to move the whole initialization into the component. Let's call it router component, because components, UI components, will be rerun when hot reloading. Like the init function is called only once, but when you do changes in the code, def UI UX components, they will be rerun, which means we can use that to reinstantiate the router when routes changed. Right. So now we want to make sure that router is recreated only when routes changed and not like every time when the router component runs. So we can put it into use memo, right? And subscribe use memo to routes, right? And then let's for example move it here so it is available. And then we can render the app here. So instead of rendering the app, we'll render the router. Then I will comment out those two. Let's see, I will reload. It's rendered, and let's introduce hello and see if it works. It didn't complain, right? And now if we click go to hello, it loads, like it navigates to the route. The error you see here is because we didn't add, we didn't handle the new route here. So let's try again. Go to hello. Yep, it works. And if I comment out it, I will reload and then I will introduce the route back. It works. Yeah. Okay. So this is the setup that you need for not only for production use, but also for development use, because like from time to time it happens that you need to add or remove routes, and it would be really nice that it will just work with hot reloading instead of you remembering to reload the page, right? So all you need to do is to initialize the router inside of use memo and subscribe use memo to routes. So whenever routes update, this function will rerun. This will reinstantiate the router, and then the app will also re-render and it will pull in the new route, and it's going to work.